interesting. Now, I'd like to get into more of your work with victims and so forth. And so I'd like to reintroduce, if people have tuned into the show just now, we are with Sandra L Brown, and she is the author of Women Who Love Psychopaths. And I've been looking at the reviews. It seems like fantastic reviews. People love your book. And I would just encourage people to check it out. And while you're at it, you check out my website at michaelcross.net and also my YouTube station at Michael Cross, the Michael Cross that, is listed with Freedom from Conscience. Sandra, in the second half here, could you again just kind of a quick review? What exactly is a psychopath, just summed up? You there, Sandra?
In and out quite a bit, Mike.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, that is better.
Okay, great. So now that our Skype's working again, I just wanted you to maybe just a really, really quick recap for those that just tuned in. What exactly is a psychopath?
Psychopath is a disorder related to superficial, shallow, callous, lack of conscience and empathy, people that are highly manipulative and impulsive, poor behavioral controls that cause incredible damage to non-psychopathic people.
I was going to bring this up in the first half. You were originally in marketing. Did you see people that after you got out of marketing, you kind of reflected thinking, wow, he or she, I think they were psychopaths?
Well, after I started working in the field of psychopathy, yes, I can look back now and think of all sorts of people in my life growing up, neighbors, teachers, clergy, lots of people that I now know were somewhere on that low conscience spectrum. So, yes, and I think that's the issue about why the Institute that I'm involved in does what it does is for public pathology education, because most countries very poorly educate the public about pathology, despite that it's one of the leading mental health problems in any country, both for the psychopath and for the psychopath's victims, and that we don't have enough public pathology education teaching other people what pathology is and how to spot it and how to get away from it.
Mm-hmm. You say you work with primarily partners of psychopaths. Does that also include people that were they know that one of their parents or maybe both of their parents were psychopaths? And
yeah, yes, we have people that contact us because they feel that there was a family member who was psychopathic and they've been impacted by, early childhood exposure to psychopathy, or we have partners who are leaving relationships with someone in the low conscience spectrum and needing, recovery support in order to recover.
Mm-hmm. Could you tell? You must have some sort of way of kind of being able to sift out the people who just feel hurt by someone, because I think everyone can hurt someone. The ones that just feel that they've been abused by a partner, and the ones that you can determine really were psychopathic partners.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mostly we use the Robert Hare's PCLR traits. There's also Robert Hare developed an instrument called the P-scan, the psychopathy scan, which is for family members or outside people who can identify the behavior. And so we use that, and we also use the DSM criteria for narcissism, antisocial as well. And so I think really what differentiates from merely an abusive relationship, it has a lot to do with the callousness and to me, one of the traits, the gaslighting that happens, that normal people in relationships, even when they're breaking up, don't seek to control someone else's reality. And psychopaths love that. And the other disorders with low conscience. That whole issue of power and control, and we know, sort of about the power and control stuff that's talked about in domestic violence circles. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the whole issue of controlling someone's reality. Because when you want to gaslight someone to that degree, to control how they see themselves, others in the world, that's a different level of pathological manipulation that normal people, even in a bad relationship, don't engage in.
Well, how would they control someone's reality? Let's say you've got a person who, let's say you have a person in a relationship who is being, I've heard this term, it seems to be getting very popular, and I guess it has something to do with a movie from the 1950s, but gaslighting. And I'm not quite sure how that works in the sense of how a psychopath would go about altering this. It seems like it's on the cerebral level. Could you go into that in a little detail?
They like to alter your sense of what you see, hear, and experience. For instance, one of our clients came home early from work and caught her psychopathic husband in their bed, with someone else. And she went into the room, she yelled and screamed, she threw stuff at them, she grabbed the woman by the hair, jerked her out of her bed. I mean, she had interactions with them. She got very angry, stormed out of the house, got in her car, drove away, got down the street and thought, heck no, I'm going back and dealing with this. And so she goes back to go at it again with him. And by the time she gets back, the girl is gone. He's laying on the couch watching TV. And she comes in and, just starts right back up into the conversation about the betrayal. And he's looking at TV and he says, "What are you talking about? Are you okay? I've been worried about you for a while. You haven't been acting the same. Would you like for me to drive you to the hospital? I think you need to be checked." That's gaslighting, when the desire to manipulate someone's, you didn't see what you see, you didn't hear what you heard, you didn't experience what you experienced. In 25 years, I have never heard of a relationship with a psychopath that didn't try to do some level of gaslighting.
Can that also include altering the person's belief system, breaking them away from their family, trying to rebuild them from the ground up, sort of like erase whatever program is in their mind and put something else in?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the whole, for them, power and control stuff. Not like what we hear in domestic violence circles, but the ultimate, yes, rebuilding from the ground up, every part of them. And it's not that different from cult mentalities. The kinds of stuff we saw with people coming out of cults that gaslighted, they gaslighted them to alter their reality so they could dismantle them and rebuild them from the ground up.
So when someone comes in and you've determined that yes, they were involved with someone, let's start. Okay, let's actually, because everyone's waiting for the relationship thing. Let's start with the question I had about someone comes in and they realize that their parents or parent has been this way. That they've had a lot of problems, I guess, in life, and maybe they come in their early 20s. What kind of problems does that cause for a child of a psychopath, whether it's the mother or father?
Mm-hmm. Certainly, power and control issues. A lot of our people that come in are people that are engaging in relationships as adults with psychopaths. We have had people come in who have had pathological parents, and they've got a lot of them have addiction issues, trust issues, the typical dysfunctional family kinds of outcomes that you have, but much, much more elevated. Many of them, even without violence, that were in families with pathological parents, have post-traumatic stress that was not generated from levels of violence. And that goes a little contrary to what people normally think related to PTSD. But they have a lot of intrusive thoughts and cognitive dissonance. He's good. People are good. They're bad. I should be here. I should not be here. But again, most of our clients come in as people not having had normal parents and ending up in a relationship with a psychopathic partner. And we were interested in why people who did not have traumatic backgrounds, we can understand why people who might have had a parent that was a psychopath would repeat. It's kind of that trauma reenactment. We understand that. We understand why people who had psychopathic partner or parents end up with psychopathic partners. What we couldn't understand was why people who came from normal families ended up with psychopathic partners. And very often in psychology classes, we were always taught about the strength of the family unit, and especially girls and fathers relationships, that one of the prevention keys for women ending up with violent men was a strong, healthy relationship with their father. And we didn't find any of that to be true. About half of our women might have had a pathological somebody in their past, an uncle, a sibling, whatever, but half of them did not. And that's where we got interested in if this is not trauma replay, what is it? What is going on? Why people would end up with psychopathic partners?
Mm-hmm. So Are there variables that you found that seem to explain it, or is it just that the psychopath, male or female, is very good at seduction and bringing someone into their world?
Well, they certainly are. That is one of their skill sets. And so that for a long time we believed it was only that psychopaths are good at that. But they're also smart, and so they know what works for them. And so I really had to believe that there was a pattern to their selection. They're not just throwing a bunch of crap against the wall and see what sticks. They have figured out what works for them. In all their deficiencies, in all of their strengths, what kind of person makes the best and easiest partner for them. And so, yes, we just concluded a research project with Purdue University in which we tested 800 women that had been in relationships with psychopathic male partners, and found personality trait elevations, significant personality trait elevations, at the heart of what a psychopath is likely seeking. I don't think normal people seek psychopaths. Psychopaths seek target select, and they know what works for them. And so, yes, there are. We now know that there are personality traits that make someone a pretty good target for a psychopath.
Yeah, what would some of those be?
We use the 5-factor model, which is a really popular personality assessment type of tool, and they tested very high in what they call the cooperation group of traits that would include high levels of trust, altruism, empathy, being very open, warm, and so very conscientious, resourceful, helpful, loyal, and these trait elevations were not just a little bit, they were really very elevated. And so, there's been, because of psychopathy and Asperger's, etc., there's been a lot of study about empathy, about not enough empathy. We know, psychopathy has lower levels of empathy, but so does, the whole autism spectrum shows lower empathy. But we haven't studied what happens when someone has too much empathy, the whole hyper-empathy, high levels of blind trust, what we would call blind trust, and altruism. And so this is sort of the beginning of looking at, can there be a problem if someone has too much empathy, too much trust? And it certainly makes sense in understanding a balance why a psychopath who has no empathy would pick someone who has too much empathy, because it's the only way that the relationship might sort of feel normal in the beginning, that someone with hyper-empathy can cover, 3 times, the lack of empathy. It carry that load in the relationship, at least until she recognizes, what's going on. And so I think we'll start seeing a lot more studying of this issue about the hyperempathy and blind trust and some of these trait elevations that psychopaths seem to be able to figure out fairly early on in their patterns of selection. Again, some of the psychopathic males I had in group, when I asked them, how do you pick a partner, they said early on that they would give a sad story, like a child abuse story. And that if the person had a response and they were empathetic to that or trying to be helpful or resourceful, like, oh, you should get a therapist, or, oh, have you ever read this book, or whatever, that would be a green light for them to pursue. But if someone said to them, well, sorry for your luck, and, walked away, that was not someone they were going to track down in a cocktail party. So they baited by testing for empathy.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, it seems like they're either at the subconscious level trying to compensate for their own lack of empathy, or they are targeting people that they can, manipulate in a cult-like manner.
Yeah, I would not say they are trying to compensate, because especially in the empathy area, I think they've figured out pretty well that their lack of empathy has worked really well for them. I think it's more baiting, trait seeking, for a relationship, more than it is any kind of compensation in that area.
In all of your work, have you actually ever encountered a person who was, let's say, one person in the relationship was borderline and the other one was psychopathic?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, that's like gasoline and fire. Some of the worst cases I've ever had, the most violent cases, were when both parties had some kind of personality disorder. One was borderline, narcissistic, antisocial, any of those, or all of them, and the other one was psychopathic. And we could call that, the Jerry Springer show, in some ways, like the kind of daytime stuff. But in all truth, those were some of the cases where the fatalities are very, very high, because you have two people with low conscience and low impulse control, in which you add some addiction problems to it and some mood disorder problems, then it's inevitable harm.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, again, I integrated that in my first book. But the thing is, it seems like that, at least the image I get, is that borderlines tend to be very emotional and can erupt. But at the same time, psychopaths can actually be kind of the Hannibal Lecter, very cool, calm, and collected, and maybe not even react during an entire episode. And, when you said the thing about Jerry Springer, that kind of reminded me of some of those shows where he might have the person's confronted, one person's screaming and yelling, the other one's just sitting there like, oh, this is interesting, like that, and then they're able to sweet talk the other person. It seems like there'd almost be an attraction, but also a volatile nature of that relationship.
Absolutely. And, the whole issue about psychopathology, we only work in the realm of the cluster B and psychopathy combinations. But within that, it's
Okay, you back on there?
Yep, I'm back.
Okay,
so,
great. Continue with where you were at there.
We work within the whole cluster B psychopathology combination, and so, I think when you get relationships like that, it's a lot like a cocktail. So there is, the psychopath may have, a big splash of psychopathy and a few drops of borderline and a couple gulps of narcissism, but the next borderline might have, or the next pathological person might have much more narcissism or much more borderline and a little bit of psychopathic traits. And so a lot of it has to do with the mixture of the cluster B disorders. You start seeing a lot of that emotionality when you get people who have, borderline in the combination. But, over 60% of people who have one personality disorder have more than one. So in the 25 years that I have done this, when people come in, the first thing we do is we try to assess the partner. They're not with them, but using the DSM and sort of the behavioral history to see, what combination are we talking about. And I would say 70% of the time they have traits of borderline, narcissistic, antisocial, and psychopathic. One of those will be stronger. And when you start seeing, a lot of the mutual emotionality and a lot of the mutual impulse control problems, you usually have, strong borderline and strong antisocial factors.
Wow. I guess the kids from that relationship wouldn't have an enjoyable Norman Rockwell sort of upbringing, would they?
Well, not only that, but, personality disorders have high transmittable rates. It does matter who you have children with. Genes do matter. And when you get two parents, that have personality disorders, it's just like, addictions. I mean, that there is a hereditary factor, that personality disorders are not just environmental, that they are genetic. And so, yes, the kids, have a good chance of having personality disorders themselves, and then add the environment of what it's like to have two personality disordered parents and, the Jerry Springer every day in your living room kind of living arrangement, and yeah, you get some pretty messed up kids.
Yeah, I can imagine. Hey, I have a lot more questions I'd love to ask, but we're coming up on the end of the show here. Could you tell our listening audience how they can get in touch with your organization, as well as how they can find out how to get one of your books? Especially looks intriguing, Women Who Love Psychopaths.
They can contact us through saferelationshipsmagazine.com, and we are the Institute for Relational Harm Reduction. And the book, Women Who Love Psychopaths and How to Spot a Dangerous Man Before You Get Involved, are available on our website and through Amazon.
Well, I would really highly recommend people look at it. This has been very, very interesting and enlightening, time to learn about what goes on, not just in the abstract form, but also at the interpersonal level when it comes to psychopathy. So thank you very much, Sandra.
Thank you, Mike, for having me on. Enjoyed it.
Okay, well, thank you. And to our listening audience, thank you for tuning in this week to Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions.
on the Tracks you can catch every Monday night and Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard